but they are very good at it. The 5 pillars of TQM are product, process, organization, leadership, and commitment, as shown in this illustration. Product is the focal point for organization purpose and achievement. Quality in the product is impossible without quality in the process. Quality in the process is impossible without the right organization. The right organization is meaningless without the proper leadership. Strong bottom-up commitment is the support pillar for all the rest. Each pillar depends upon the other 4, and if one is weak, all are like the links in a chain. All companies need to improve their competitive edge. Traditional management approaches are major culprits in growing problems within organizations. These problems are steadily increasing as globalization unfolds. That need not be the case. The globalization age offers even greater, not less, opportunity for national success and well-being, and for the success of the international corporation. One result of globalization is the exposure of management inadequacies that have long lain hidden. They were not easy to identify because local comparisons, colored by identical cultural influences, have been insufficient to reveal them for what they are. They are the products of a management culture that developed in older, less complex times. Those times of comparative economic isolation and insulation featured advantages of special industrial know-how that have now evaporated, and absence of strong outside competition to force introspection and change. Those days are over, everywhere, and over dramatically and completely in America as anywhere. America and other countries are not faring well in the glare of those new circumstances and new comparisons. I would pose these questions. Why do some companies based in some nations innovate more than others? Why do some nations provide an environment that enables companies to improve and innovate faster than foreign rivals? In the past, most intelligence or market research has been focused on studying what customers are like among available products. The most important question for today's organization, however, is what products or services will be required in the future. Today's companies must work towards satisfying those needs. Few companies have a true global customer. That is, a description by age, income, need, or other indicators that are homogeneous throughout the world. There are some global customers, such as cola drinkers, chocolate candy eaters, and those who enjoy McDonald's hamburgers. But most customers are like beer drinkers. They differ from country to country. Tastes, spendable income, and cultural preferences vary. Therefore, customer mapping is an important part of the strategic process. The major elements of customer mapping or charting are 1. Total sales volume, 2. Potential for globalization, 3. Degree of localization, 4. Cultures and values. As a result of improved communications and the impact of television, movies, and travel, customer tastes and requirements are converging. In summary, it is not necessary to have a global customer to be a global business, but the customer's need remains the most important element in your strategy formulations. Needs vary according to culture and many other factors, and your sensitivity to these factors will be the key to future needs. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you.
Let's begin the first question and answer session. We will try to answer as many questions as possible. Therefore, we request that only one question be asked per phone call or fax, and that these questions be as brief as possible. You may call the studio directly at the phone or fax numbers which now appear on your screen. And please remember not to stand too close to the monitor to avoid electronic feedback. Our first question is a fax from Universidad Tecnológica de Panamá, and it is, why do some companies innovate more than others?
Frank, I think I would say that there are two major elements that impact a company's decision to innovate. One is the nature of the company's products or services. The second is capital and resources available to the company. If a company manufactures products or services, for instance, computer products, the software, there's such a change in that type of product and demand in the marketplace drives a company to remain at the cutting edge of technology. The second, resources, is really important because it costs so much to have research and development to innovate and develop new technology. Mm-hmm. Those are, I think, the two major elements that impact the decision on whether to innovate or not.
Thank you. Second fax question is from UNAM in Mexico, and it is addressed to Mr. Schultz, and it asks that you elaborate a bit on the work that you did with McDonnell Douglas, and further, what were the main cultural problems that you encountered?
Well, I think I would answer the second part of the question first, which is that I really did not encounter many cultural problems. As long as we all understand each other's cultures and respect each other's cultures, I found that doing business in the four countries that I centered upon or was sent to, which were Finland, Yugoslavia, Austria, and Hungary, I did not encounter cultural problems, although seeds of unrest were happening in Yugoslavia, unfortunately, at that time that we know about today. What I did with McDonnell Douglas, I had a working arrangement with their countertrade and offset program. And basically what Douglas and other companies that maintain countertrade programs say, in the case of Douglas, if you buy our airplanes, we will help you market products made in your country in our country, meaning in the United States. And I was sent there as a so-called expert in the field of the furniture industry because that is my family background and my background. And I went overseas specifically to guide them as to what products to manufacture there that would be more saleable here. The idea to generate more hard currency to down the line pay for the airplanes. Mm-hmm. Basically, we're looking at one word, and that's called barter. That's my answer.
Thank you very much. We have a phone call now from Universidad Estatal de a Distancia in San Jose, Costa Rica. What is your call, please?
We would like to know how to link the globalization problem or issue to a development strategy, economic development strategy, both also social strategy on a national level, or if we should just renounce to such a strategy, and this is applied specifically to Central America.
I might answer that somehow. The whole concept of globalization, as we've already stated, is to remove barriers between nations, or borders even between nations. And it is my feeling that the governments of these countries should be more concerned and specifically concerned with the people of the countries rather than the companies and the corporations within the countries, and allow competition and free enterprise to govern. As far as social, I didn't quite understand the context of that, but the main idea is to understand more the cultures of the other nations and where the products are going and how they would be accepted. Many classic mistakes have been made in not understanding the cultures of other nations. A classic example is when General Motors chose to market their Nova automobile in South America, not realizing after extensive advertising that Nova would mean don't go or won't go. So this is a case where they didn't do their research in that area.
We have another call now from Petróleos Mexicanos in Villahermosa, Tabasco. Please give us your question.
Good morning. This is Patricia Castañeda calling. The question is, how have you overcome the globalizing process in government enterprises, state-run enterprises, where we don't have this advantage?
Well, I think that the advantages are yet to come. As the process goes forward, the process that was started with the signing and implementation of NAFTA and the opening of markets, and that is continuing through the other trade agreements that are in the process of negotiation, the bilateral and multilateral agreements, and those that have been signed, that companies, even state-owned companies like Pemex, will be able to joint venture and join into arrangements with private companies to take advantage of the new markets and opportunities that are opening up and perhaps diversify the business of the state-owned company.
Thank you. We have another call now from Instituto Tecnológico de Atzapangan in Michoacán. Go ahead, please.
Por favor, alejarse. Bueno.
Sí, muy buenos días.
Good morning.
Del Instituto Tecnológico Superior de Apatzingán, Michoacán, hace la siguiente
We have a question for you, gentlemen. What is the profile that the future professionals should have faced with the changes brought about by globalization? What would be the ideal profile?
Very good question.
Well,
Go ahead.
In my opinion, the ideal profile would be someone who is multicultural, bilingual, or multilingual, has an appreciation of the business processes and the different legal structures of the various countries in which they will be engaging in business.
And I might add, computer literate.
Absolutely.
Thank you. We have a fax now in from Instituto Tecnológico de Orizaba. Why do some nations provide an environment that enables companies to improve and innovate faster than foreign rivals?
Well, I would answer that it has to do with the freedoms that exist within the country and the desire to become competitive in world markets. The strongest single factor in the global imperative is the drive for superior competitive performance. And if that desire is there, then the people will feel that desire, and the government should allow them to pursue these goals.
I would add that the traditionally companies that develop technology and pay to develop proprietary information are reluctant to go into environments and into countries where there aren't protections of that intellectual property and the technology that they have paid to develop. Today the trend is to initiate and enact laws and protections, processes that allow companies to have the protections that they have at home in order to preserve their ownership interest in the technology that they've developed. That's making it easier for them to go abroad with this technology, and countries that are providing those protections are encouraging businesses to come in.
We have many, many phone calls coming in, and the next one is from Comisión Federal de Electricidad, CECAT, in Mexico. What is your question, please?
I am calling you from Mexico, D.C., DF. You were saying a few moments ago that globalization is calling for more proficiency, more competitiveness, and we should eliminate barriers, tariff barriers, and have an easy flow and free flow of goods. How is it possible then that the United States of America prohibits and sanctions and punishes Mexican workers who are working in that country then? Will you answer my question? Thank you.
Well, I'll address that. First of all, we do not live in a perfect world, and I'm not here to defend malpractices that may have occurred. As far as the mistreatment of Mexican workers, I won't deny that perhaps there have been some problems in that area. But my family came to this country generations ago as immigrants, as 99% of the people that occupy the United States, and were able to succeed here by hard work and through free enterprise. None of us that are thinking people want practices to take place that would restrain or restrict people from doing that, because that is what has made our country successful. Do you want to say anything in that area?
Well, I'm a product of immigration. My father came from Mexico in the 1930s. I was born in Los Angeles and educated in the United States. My father came over as an illegal immigrant, as we call them here in the United States, and never became a U.S. citizen. He was a legal permanent resident, but he got that opportunity over time and through the historical trends that we've gone through in the United States and in California in particular. It's a major problem that's a multi-dimensional problem. It's not an easy a question to answer, and I don't really think that we have the time to get into the complex issues involved in the immigration problems in the U.S. in this program. It is a fascinating topic, however, and I think it's a very interesting question.
Our next call is from Instituto Tecnológico de Tlaxiaco in Oaxaca. What's your question, please?
Muy buenos días.
¿Podría alejarse del monitor?
Buenos días. Sí. Bueno. Hablo desde el Instituto.
I'm calling from the Technological Institute from Oaxaca, Tlaxiaco, Oaxaca, Mexico. What are the positive and negative aspects that come about with the globalization of the economy in the developing world, in the developing countries?
Well, first of all, there are 4 ways that
Yes.
countries can be involve themselves in multinational business, and some of them have legalistic implications, of course, but basically we're talking about internal growth, which you have an example in the case of Nestle, Sony, Shell, but internal growth now is not the most desirable way to become competitive in the world marketplace, because it is too slow a process. From that, we go into strategic alliances where companies agree to work together for a common goal. And a third way would be joint ventures, which are becoming most prevalent. They are not 100% successful, and there have been some notable failures in the areas of joint ventures, such as Chrysler and Daewoo, and there are others that I could mention. And finally, we get into mergers and acquisitions. And I'm sure during the context of this program, we'll discuss all 4 of these methods of entering into the multinational field.
Let's move on with our phone calls, and thank you for all your calls. Our next one is from Comisión Federal de Electricidad, Atoyac, Mexico. What's your question, please?
Gracias. El costo de inversión,
the investment cost, how could that be absorbed, amortized, and who should do that, and what's the time that we should expect for the developing countries to take in order to amortize this the costs?
Well, aside from the obvious accounting answer as to how you would amortize the investment cost, it depends on the agreement you have with your partner, assuming you have a partner that you've entered into any one of the methods that I've just discussed. This is part of the negotiation that takes place in obtaining in achieving agreement with your partner. Maybe you'd like to add to that.
Well, I think the question of amortization of the investment cost depends on the source of repayment for the investment. If we're talking about an investment that's going to be repaid through the sale of a product to the public, and we're depending on local currency for repayment, I think that's going to have a major impact on the amortization on the investment.
Thank you. Our next call is from Instituto Tecnológico de Tuxtepec in Oaxaca. We're listening.
Sí, buenos días.
Good morning.
La siguiente pregunta
The
la
question is as follows. This comes from a CPA,
La pregunta es la siguiente.
and the question is, in Mexico, the industrial and commercial bloc means small and large enterprises. What do you think should be implemented for all of these micro enterprises, small businesses, not disappear as a drop in the big ocean?
Well, I hate to keep answering the beginning of every question. My company deals in assisting many small companies, specifically and particularly in Mexico, to obtain capitalization in order to enable them to achieve their goals. And we're looking at areas right now that we hope will open up, such as equipment leasing. This is an area that unfortunately we haven't been able to provide a great deal of assistance to small companies with, but we feel that this is opening up and will open up. There are 5 companies now, American companies, that are involved in equipment leasing. And the concerns on the other side of the coin have to do with what happens in case of a default and how does a leasing company, let's say in the United States, protect its collateral. It's been a difficult situation up to now. Another major way that we have to provide capital for small emerging companies is the process called factoring, where accounts receivable or invoices are purchased, and a factory will, let's say, or a provider of services will receive payment immediately upon the shipment of goods. And we even go beyond that and work with the suppliers to see that the factories obtain the raw materials in order to manufacture the product and satisfy the customer. So we do have ways of assisting small companies, and we are doing that right now.
I would add that the arrangements we're talking about in terms of strategic alliances and joint ventures are not just for major companies. I think that they are great vehicles for small business people, for micro businesses to engage in business and to globalize. We have the North American Free Trade Agreement between Mexico, Canada, and the United States. And U.S. companies, small and large, U.S. businessmen, small businessmen and large businessmen are taking advantage of the opportunity to go into Mexico and Canada. I think Mexican companies, Mexican business people, small business people could join together with small U.S. companies, form alliances, and take advantage of the opportunities that the markets here could provide to them.
Very well. Let's move on with our calls. Our next call is from Dirección General de Institutos Tecnológicos in Mexico. What is your question, please?
Habla José Aquino de la Dirección General de Institutos Tecnológicos.
I'm calling from Mexico, and I have a question.
económicos de cada país.
Different countries have different circumstances, economic circumstances. How can we standardize all these financial and economic problems in order to apply transnational? How can we apply these to transnational business relationships if we all have different problems in our different countries, different realities, financial and economic realities?
There is an attempt to come up with mechanisms to standardize and to get more transparency between the systems in the United States, Mexico, and Canada, so that some of the differences, and there are major differences, and there are a lot of similarities as well, but to get beyond some of the differences, for instance, in the U.S. we have a mechanism for recording a security interest in personal property to secure a loan. The Mexican systems are much different than the U.S. systems and the Canadian systems. The Canadian systems and the U.S. systems are much more alike because they both stem from the English common law system and they've developed in similar ways. The Mexican system is based on civil law, and the mechanisms for obtaining and securing a security interest in collateral are much different. There is a study that's being undertaken right now to see if there is some way to bring those systems more in line so that there's a central recording system for a security interest in personal property that could be initiated in Mexico, and to make other changes in both systems, the Canadian and U.S. system and the Mexican system, to get more standardization. I think if there can be cooperation of that nature that continues, and there can be more of a standardization, it will be easier to do business, and there'll be more of a sense of security because there'll be more familiarity within the systems.
Thank you. Let's move along with our calls. Next is Instituto Tecnológico de Costa Grande in Zihuatanejo, Guerrero.
Buenos días.
Guerrero, Mexico. Good morning. I'm calling you from Mexico, from the Technological Institute of Zihuatanejo. Question is, what do you think would be the impact in Mexico for micro businesses, small businesses in Mexico? What would this impact be, particularly for small businesses in Mexico?
Well, I think we've answered that question somewhat. The opportunities for small businesses are great. The ability to aid these companies financially and in other ways are there. I think that it's just a case of identifying the problems and getting to people who can and will assist the companies. I think we've covered that.
Well, I think, Stan, one of the points that you make is a good one, and that's putting companies together. It's finding ways for small companies to make contact, small Mexican companies to make contact with the appropriate business entities in the United States. And there are groups in the United States that are coming together through chambers of commerce groups and other trade groups that are looking for trading partners that are smaller businesses. And I know that in Mexico there are many organizations that are coming together and performing the same kind of service for their members, such as Canacintra.
Thank you. Our final question, and thank you for all of your questions, but for this session, our final question is from Petróleos Mexicanos, Agua Dulce, Veracruz. Escuchamos.
Sí, buenos días.
I believe.
Habla Julio César Ramos Vidal de Pemex Exploración.
I'm calling from Pemex, Agua Dulce, Veracruz, Mexico. I have a question for Mr. Schultz. Have you said, Mr. Schultz, that development of new products is a condition that guarantees competitiveness of the organizations. In other words, innovation. However, currently we are in a race of so many products that are very, very much far away from the basic needs of a human being. For instance, weaponry, disarmament, and all these junk products. What are the possibilities for organizations to orient themselves rather to cover for the basic needs that up until now have been very, very not really covered or satisfied? Thank you.
Well, that's a very good question, and it's an all-encompassing question. Getting to basics, you try to manufacture or produce a product, whether it's an actual product or a service, that addresses needs. Because one of the most important ways of being successful in a business is to go into a marketplace with a product that is needed. So it's just a case of identifying and researching those products and satisfying the need. I know that's oversimplification, but your statement that that companies are busy making products that are not needed, I would say those companies will not remain in business. You have to satisfy needs and identify them.
I think I agree, Stan. It's the law of supply and demand. If there's a market for the products that are going to be manufactured, in the U.S. there are many companies that have been selling defense products to the U.S. government, and budgets have now changed. Many of those companies are now in the process of taking that technology that's been developed, that was manufactured and developed for the defense industry, and they're taking those processes and products and trying to rechannel the focus into the needs of society. There's a lot of new products being developed as a result of all of that research and development. I won't give you any examples, but that is the case.
Well, I think the Bible talks